Hello and welcome to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where I talk transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I am the traffic anchor and the transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber. And two things I'm excited about today. Today is episode number 185, which is stunning to me as I am approaching now 200 episodes, which is really quite remarkable. And I'm also excited today as I'm going to be speaking with a guy named Nick Dehn. And Nick is an auto insurance expert, as well as the content specialist for the online price comparison website called Insurify. And Insurify says that they use artificial intelligence to make insurance shopping simple, affordable, and hassle-free. They have a couple of recent studies out. One that I found very interesting, and it's about the trends in cost and coverage of auto insurance. And you know how much auto insurance has changed this year with the pandemic and how much driving has changed. And the risk is obviously lower for auto insurance companies because there are fewer people driving. And those people that are driving, typically they're not driving as far. So their risk is lower, but they're still charging the same amount of money, right? They're still charging me the same amount of money. And actually my rates are going up a little bit, which it kind of bugs me. And then to get this, all right, so a lot of companies were giving out some discounts, right? Some kickbacks, if you will, for the people who have been customers during the pandemic. My kickback, my return on my insurance was $25 a month for a policy that costs $900 every 6 months. So that didn't really help me. It was, it was fine. It was nice, but it didn't really help me out a whole lot. It just doesn't seem right that the price for the car insurance keeps going up when everybody's driving less. Anyway, we'll talk to Nick about that as well as a bunch of the other interesting goings on there in the auto insurance industry, because it's a pain in the butt. That's what it is, actually. Insurify also has this interesting study on the top 10 auto insurance companies that I thought were pretty interesting. There are ones you'll know, and there are others that you probably never heard of. So we'll talk about those lists as well. And if you want those lists, they're actually on the description of this show. You can just click the link, and they're right there. It's the nature of my job on TV to report on problem spots when they happen, whether it's a stalled truck or a crash or whatever happens. Well, I have a pet peeve. And when it comes to especially print reporters, and it can be broadcast reporters, anybody who puts it down in print or says it, but it's usually in print, when somebody reports on a crash, so many times, especially on these written articles, the writer will make it sound as if the vehicle in a crash does the crashing rather than the driver operating the vehicle doing the crashing. For example, there was this headline: "Car leaves scene after hitting several parked cars." A sentence like that makes it sound like the car did the driving and the crime instead of the driver behind the wheel. Now, it is possible in a Tesla to do that, I suppose, if a Tesla self-driving is doing some really bad self-driving. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet with fully autonomous cars doing the driving for us. It is 99% of the time, a person behind the wheel doing the driving, doing the crashing, doing the whatever. It's not the vehicle. Well, someone else has a similar problem with this kind of reporting. His name is Carlton Reid, and he's a senior contributor to Forbes magazine in the United Kingdom, and he's been writing about transportation for the last 30 years. And he really focuses on bike advocacy in the UK, but sometimes he writes about other transportation issues. And Carlton wrote an article about some new guidelines reporters in the UK, not just traffic people, but any reporter, should be using when they're writing about crashes. And I think those guidelines should be instituted here in the United States. We could start with the traffic people, and then we can move on to all the reporters that have to report on crashes or other issues. And this article from Carlton Reid starts like this. From reading some news headlines and ensuing articles, you would be thinking that cars were already self-driving. That from UK journalist Laura Laker, one of the drafters of new guidelines to be issued to journalists who write about road traffic crashes. Laura says it's important we remember collisions involve vehicles piloted by people. I could not agree more. That is exactly what my point is. Vehicles are piloted by people. All right, back to this article. Search on Google for reporting of road traffic incidents, and you'll find plenty of examples. Car overturns in crash. Family had a lucky escape after car leaves road and hits tree on country lane. Car leaves scene of crash, then collides with house. The editors who headlined those articles and the journalists who provided the copy neglected to include the person. And this is damaging and wrong, says new expert-led media guidelines, which state that publishers should make mention of human actors in a collision. Crashes have causes, and these causes are invariably due to poor driving, often dangerous driving, yet reporters the world over sometimes steer clear of ascribing actions to humans when the incidents, many of which are either obviously criminal or turn out to be so, involve motorists. There's no reporting about autonomous assault rifles or swords going on solo stabbing sprees. There's always people. Gunman on rampage. Killer armed with knife tackled by police. The new UK reporting guidelines were drafted by journalists and academics and advised by police, lawyers, and expert groups such as the UK's National Union of Journalists. The guidelines were produced by the University of Westminster's Active Travel Academy and aim to help journalists, broadcasters, and publishers improve the public debate around road safety. While guidelines already exist for reporting on suicide, children, and refugees, none specifically guide best practice around reporting on road collisions, continued this statement. Now, this article that is coming from Carlton Reid, senior contributor to Forbes magazine in the United Kingdom, then switches subjects into the debate that I've been talking about for a long time, that a crash is not necessarily an accident. And I'm sure you've heard on radio or TV, everybody says accident. Well, accident implies no intent, but there could be intent on the part of some of the drivers involved in these wrecks. We just don't know. So that's why you don't call them an accident. Well, Carlton Reid continues on that theme in that article, and he says, planes do not slam into the ground accidentally. They crash. However, such language is not always used for road smashes. They are often described as accidents, as though no one was at fault. Campaign groups have been lobbying for neutral road incident vocabulary for many years. Crash, not accident, is common mantra, and research published last year demonstrated that the leading language used in media reporting often results in so-called victim blaming. Simple changes to how we talk about crashes can help move the needle on public support for safer streets, said Kelsey Ralph, one of the academics behind the research. In earlier research, Ralph found that new articles about road crashes refer to vehicles in 81% of cases, but refer to a driver in just 19% of the time. In 2016, Associated Press, here in the United States, their style guide, changed to encourage journalists to use crash, collision, or other terms instead of accident. Good reporting should inform, said John Ranson from the National Union of Journalists Ethics Council, but too much of the media's coverage of road collisions has played into and reinforced lazy generations. The co-chair of the UK Parliamentary Group on Cycling and Walking agreed. Tory MP Celine Saxby says, we have media reporting guidelines for a whole variety of serious societal issues, and so it's important that the road collisions are included. It may seem harmless to speak of vehicles speeding, running red lights, or running people down, thereby implying no human responsibility, but the knock-on effects contribute to an increased danger on our roads and failing through our justice system. Now, before I get to their road collision reporting guidelines that has 4 different parts, that's actually a really interesting statement here because as I talked about with other guests on the show, they always say that it's the vehicles that are killing everybody. It's not the vehicle. it's the person behind the wheel. And usually that person is distracted by their phone most often, by other things as well, but mostly driving and being distracted is what causes most injuries and deaths, unfortunately, with people or bicyclists who are on the road. It's not necessarily the vehicle. Now, they will argue, and we've heard about that on this show, is that the new size of the vehicle and everybody's driving SUVs is killing people because of the size of the vehicle. And yeah, there is something to the shape of a vehicle. I did a interview, maybe it was a couple of years ago, from this automotive writer in Detroit talking about just that, about the change in the style of the front end of most vehicles. And most are now flat instead of being more pointed for aerodynamics. And I think most of that is for the sensors for eventual self-driving autonomy, so they can see the road better, instead, because you can't really have all that equipment in a car that comes to a point. And with a car that comes to a point, though, if you're a pedestrian and you get hit, you actually roll up on the car and up onto the hood and the windshield, rather than a flat-ended vehicle, and you get more broadside injuries that way because there is more size to the vehicle, and you get into that crash. So I thought that was an interesting statement there, that it isn't. It really, I mean, it is partially the vehicle, but it's the person driving the vehicle that is the problem here. And it always should be thought of as somebody is driving that car and is responsible for operating it and the actions that they do and the injuries that they cause. Okay, so the road collision reporting guidelines here from the UK. It has 4 different parts. Impartiality. Publishers must not use the term accident when describing road conditions. Collision or crash are more accurate, especially when the facts of the incident are not known. Discrimination. Publishers must avoid using negative generalizations of road users and must not use dehumanizing language or that which may incite violence or hatred against a road user in comment and news coverage. Accuracy. Coverage of perceived risks on the road should be above all accurate, based in fact and content. Publishers should make mention of human actors in collisions and avoid references to personal protective equipment such as high-vis and helmets, except when demonstrated relevant. And reporting on crime. Publishers must avoid portraying dangerous or criminal behavior on the road, such as speeding, as acceptable, or those caught breaking the law as victims. So there you go. And I think that's pretty interesting, an interesting article. And again, this is from Carlton Reid, who is a senior contributor to Forbes magazine in the United Kingdom. He's been writing about transportation for, he said, 30 years, and he really does focus a lot on bike advocacy and bike safety and that sort of thing. And speaking of crashes and wrecks and the like, car insurance is something that we are required to have when owning a vehicle, but it isn't something that we like paying for. I sure don't. My bill is almost $2,000 a year, and that's for 2 older cars, and I've shopped around a lot. And that is the least expensive price anywhere I can find. There is an online company, and there's a lot of these companies that will help you find cheaper insurance, they say. And there's one called Insurify, and they help you compare and buy and manage your insurance online. They say they use artificial intelligence to make insurance shopping simple, affordable, and hassle-free. Insurify released a couple of interesting studies lately about car insurance, and I wanted to explore more of it right here, so I've invited insurance expert and Insurify's content specialist, Nick Dehn, to be here on the show. Nick, thanks for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason. Really appreciate it.
All right, Nick, before we talk about that top 10 list, that study that looks at the top 10 insurance companies, I want to get into this study that Insurify put out that covers trends in cost and coverage in the auto insurance industry. And I think we have to start with COVID and the time since the lockdown. I would think that insurance companies overall have made out pretty well over the last 7 or 8 months, with fewer drivers on the road, fewer crashes that they have to cover, but charging the same rates.
Absolutely. Well, you brought up that Insuring the American Driver report, and that's something we're really excited about. We've just released it this past month, and what we're really analyzing here was actually pretty much inspired by the COVID-19 pandemic. Working in the, car insurance and property and casualty insurance space like we do here at Insurify, we were really interested to see how the pandemic actually affected insurance rates, for the consumer. Now, like you said, you can imagine that the auto insurance industry in particular has made a killing here, but we were trying to find out, to what extent did that relief actually come to consumers? As you can imagine, our analysis found that yes, driving behavior changed as a result of this national, lockdown, if you want to call it. For the most part, driving behaviors changed in that people were driving a lot less. We saw that there was a 28% decrease in number of miles driven from March through May as compared to 2019. Now, at the same time, lots of different companies in the auto insurance industry were responding differently and trying to figure out what to do with maybe their surplus revenue as a result of the much lower rates of driving. So we found that actually 57% of companies ended up providing some form of payment relief this thing, which is great for the consumer. Generally, this took the form of a credit or a refund or a rebate or a discount of the policyholder's monthly payments. However, we only found that 10% of these relief measures continued past the month of May or June. So it's my educated guess here that the insurance industry wasn't necessarily expecting COVID to be raging as long as it has.
Yeah, they did offer, as to get to your point there, they offered me a rebate. I got back, get this, $25 a month for a couple of months. That's only about 2% of the cost of my policy. And while it was, a nice gesture, it didn't really help. $25 doesn't really help for a policy that's over $900 every 6 months.
Absolutely. And, we found through our analysis that the overall credit that was given back to policyholders in this period amounted to about 10 to 30% of the policyholders' monthly payment. So, not huge considering if you're someone who totally stopped driving over these many months, or someone who, had their car in storage this entire time and didn't engage in any sort of risky driver behavior. This might be a perfect period for, policyholders, you'd think, to set up a new policy outright for their previous insurance, try to find, and squeeze out as many discounts or rebates as they possibly can. And, some consumers were able to do that and were able to save year over year, whether they tried or not. However, we're finding now that most consumers just simply don't know, what the future holds in terms of their driving patterns, behaviors. And we're not positive the insurance industry, given the fact that they've put a moratorium on a lot of these rebate programs, is ready to see this thing through. We don't know how long the pandemic, might be raging. There's a lot of different factors in place right now that's going to affect how drivers are, behaving across the country, whether that's, stopping commuting altogether or having to, get rid of cars or having, now having the funds to buy more cars. It's a real question mark. And, we're not sure how the industry is necessarily going to respond. But what we do know is that, drivers now more than ever, I think, should feel empowered to sort of take their insurance decisions into their own hands, right? We're staying at home. Not depending on the state of your community, you might not have access right now to a brick and mortar agency. You might not have the, freedom right now to, take advantage of many sort of new opportunities to save as you might have before. Insurance is one of those, monthly bills, monthly payments that we don't necessarily think about all the time. We don't think on a month-to-month or quarter-to-quarter basis how we can shave the 10%, 20%, 50% off of our premiums. It's just something we sort of take for granted right now. And so the purpose of this report was trying to cut through that noise and tell consumers, wait a second, you might stand to save some more.
I'm speaking to Nick Dehn. He is a insurance expert with Insurify. We're talking trends and cost of coverage of auto insurance. I during this whole time, Nick, a couple of months ago, I thought, because I was working from home just in the last week, I'm back down in the office downtown, so I'm driving a little bit more than I was during the shutdown and working from home. but I was trying to find a discount with my insurance company, which is Esurance, a mileage discount. I was going through all the different comparisons. I went with I tried to compare my insurance online with other companies and say, well, look, I'm only driving maybe a couple of miles a day, if that, maybe less than 10 a week now, because I'm just going to the grocery store and back for the most part. But that didn't really help my price at all. And it was really not even a place in that policy questions to ask, hey, how much are you driving? I mean, what other factors affect your policy price, like how many miles you're driving?
Yeah, well, in a perfect world, right, and a lot of people think this way, your driver behavior would be the primary, if not the sole determinant of your policy price. But the fact of the matter is, it's industry convention to take a lot more variables into account. So your overall premium and the rates that you get are going to be affected by, your location, your zip code. They're also going to be affected, depending on the state, by demographic things you can't control, your age, your sex or gender. And, the financial dimensions come into it as well, of course. Your credit score and credit history are going to impact your rates, because depending on, your overall credit history, insurers are going to see you as a risky investment, or they're going to see you as, unfit to pay out in the event of an accident. And you talked just now about, trying to sniff out some discounts. It really depends on the company, but discounts are legion. If you want to get your billing statements paperless instead of through the mail, that makes you eligible for a small discount at many insurance companies. But there are other sort of factors that go into it. If you can take advantage of a homeownership discount, a married discount as opposed to single, you can even earn discounts for being part of certain professional organizations, or merely for having a BA as opposed to an associate's degree, right? All these factors come together in terms of how insurers use their sophisticated algorithms to set rates for drivers.
I know, and I'm looking at the level of education costs, and it says none on your list here is about $1,400, $1,450 a month. And then if you have a high school diploma, it jumps up. If you have a associate's degree, it goes down. If you have a bachelor's degree, it goes down further. But then if you have a master's degree, it jumps up. It seems like if you have more education, that it should continue to go down and not jump up because you have a level of degree higher than a bachelor's.
It's really interesting, and it's really complicated how each company sets its rates. How it's able to leverage its own financial strength or size or reputation in order to set lower or higher rates and market to and serve different types of drivers as well. At Insurify, we are all about serving people all across the country. You should be able to compare insurance quotes in your own terms, regardless of how high your credit score is, or whether or not you had 1 accident or 0 accidents or 5 accidents in the past 7 years on your record. What I think is interesting, and what you're articulating here, is that all these nuances and how rates can shift up or down depending on these factors that a lot of us can't necessarily control easily, is that, at the end of the day, these are sort of systemic and mutually constitutive sort of variables. One really interesting point that we found in our latest analysis was that cities and towns with majority Black residents, for example, see the highest quote prices for car insurance compared to cities of any other racial makeup. Now, it means, if you're living in that zip code, because insurance companies in many states can still discriminate based on zip code level, you can find yourself facing slightly higher rates just by virtue of the fact that you live in a majority Black neighborhood, majority Black city. Regardless of the personal, factors that should go into your rate as well, your credit score, your driving record. So it's fascinating to see how all of these variables sort of combine and ultimately paint a picture that is not the fairest for a lot of people in this country. So it's interesting to see so far as the pandemic really laid bare inequality, how can people, upon realizing these inequalities that are inherent in a system like the auto insurance industry, can they recognize that, and can they take advantage of that, and can they demand better from their insurance company, demand better for themselves for the sake of their wallet? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, I'm speaking with Insurify's content specialist, Nick Dehn. We're talking trends in cost and coverage of auto insurance. You can find this on their website at Insurify.com. The importance of location is something that you just mentioned. Like here in Colorado, we see a lot of hail. We also see some fires, as you've heard about. In the Southeast, they've seen way too many hurricanes this year than in previous years.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously in California, they've had a lot of wildfires. In different places, you're going to have, different costs depending on what natural disasters or other issues you might have in that particular location.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, regional variations in something like climate, for example, right, weather patterns, that's naturally factored into how insurers are going to be setting rates. If you're a policyholder in any of these areas, whether it's Colorado seeing a lot of hail or the Southeast, or you can imagine, you're susceptible to more hurricane damage, you as a consumer probably, have to be at some level prepared for that on a practical level. We see this playing out in the home insurance market, especially. Look at California in the midst of these, unprecedented wildfires. We know that the home insurance market is, ringing the alarm bells right now. The entire real estate space is, facing a real existential crisis in that area. And that's because there are, inherent sort of dangers in, owning a home in that sort of area of California. Now, how does that affect all of your property, all of your assets, cars and vehicles included? That's going to bear out in the insurance rates for which you're eligible, and it doesn't matter necessarily which company is setting that rates or how many quotes you're comparing. That's probably going to be taken into account. So definitely location is a factor. Who knows, maybe golf ball sized hail, could strike tomorrow and hit a bunch of windshields across Denver. I'm not sure, and that's the level of risk that insurance companies say you're implicitly taking on by living in that area.
But what do you think? Civil unrest might be a new category for insurance companies in the towns that we've seen that?
It is something that we've been investigating, and overall, we don't have the hard numbers on that, but I think it's very much on top of mind for lots of drivers out there. Not just acts of God anymore. We have to take into account, like you said, civil unrest, protests, things like that. Is my property at risk? Inherently, this is a question that I'm sure insurance companies are thinking about a lot. Across the country, as we see an uptick in what's called, we consider civil unrest. It's probably going to be reflected in how insurers set rates based, like I said before, on that zip code level. Urban areas present their own challenges for drivers in a way that rural areas don't, and vice versa, too. So I think the interesting factor that we're probably going to look into in 2021 in our next version of this report is, did insurance companies take a more or less problematic, discriminatory, or in any case, more nuanced view of how civil unrest rates, right, map onto zip codes, as you would map crime rates onto a zip code, if that had any bearing on how, they made decisions to, set rates for certain drivers. At the end of the day, many people aren't driving anymore. At the same time, many people don't have a place to store their cars. So if people are taking much more advantage of municipal street parking or something like that, or they don't have a safe place to store their property, you are presenting another risk to yourself. And, at the end of the day, insurance companies, they feed on that risk.
I'm speaking with Nick Dehn. He is Insurify's content specialist, and we're talking about on Insurify.com. They're insuring the American Driver Report. You can read it right now on Insurify.com. I also have the link here at the bottom of the show if you want to just click there, and then you can get right to that report. How important, Nick, is the driving record, you always hear about, hey, I'm going to get a ticket for whatever, speeding ticket, and see my rates jump. Are they really going to jump that high if you do get a ticket for speeding or for failure to turn your turn signal on?
It's a good question. It's really at the end of the day about the severity of the offense, right? So many insurance companies out there have built-in accident forgiveness policies, for example, for which many drivers qualify, which actually, allows for drivers not to see a rate hike as a result of getting in their first at-fault accident. But, at the end of the day, you're right. It is about this, you are going to see rates increase. Like I said before, it's about the severity of the offense, but if you get a ticket from a traffic cop, that's going to go in your record, and that's going to have some sort of material change in your overall rates. Now, is one speeding ticket in a snooze area the same as, obviously, getting cited for driving while impaired or driving under the influence? No, of course not. But at the same time, insurance companies are, doggedly following and integrated with your driver history. So whether or not you are even in an at-fault accident, if you are somehow involved in an accident that's not your fault, but your insurance company on some level has to get involved because you're the insured party, you are going to see a little bit uptick in rate. Now, convention is that any offenses that go beyond the past 7 years are basically scrubbed from your driving record and no longer have an impact on your policy. But, at the end of the day, that is one of the really factors in terms of setting rates is your driver history. Like I said before, ideally it would be the only determinant, because I'd rather be judged on my driver behavior. I think I deserve it if I'm a speeder who, got caught a year or two ago, than the fact that I happen to identify as a man, and because of that, I have to pay an average of 4 to 6% higher than, my colleague who identifies as a woman. So, driver behavior is a primary determinant, and, in most states across the country, it's increasingly becoming the most important determinant in setting rates.
And before we jump into the top 10 list of best insurance companies, what about this trend in cost overall? Do you see, as more people are hitting the roads, more people are going to go back to the office, do you see the increase continuing into 2021 and we're going to see higher prices for the foreseeable future?
It's a great question. Our initial analysis here in our latest report, we predict that, monthly payments are projected to rise by 6% in the next year. Now, this is mostly, you can just chalk it up to inflation after all. It continues a trend of year-over-year cost increases that we've been seeing for the past several years. But the question is, and I think you're hinting that in your question, right? Has 2020 changed this pattern? So far, it doesn't look like insurance providers are indicating that the trend is going to discontinue. It looks like they're going to continue to raise rates and not adjust costs, even in the face of less driving and fewer claims. And that's just because of the unpredictability and uncertainty of how the pandemic is going to affect driver behavior. What's interesting on the personal level for lots of drivers is, I'm not going to go back to the office maybe in the next 6 months to a year. I'm not going to be commuting at all. And my risk level implicitly will be dropping because of that. So there's two things. It's A, how's the industry going to respond? Are they going to be honest about the fact that driving rates, total miles driven, have plummeted, and are they going to respond in kind? And then parallel to that, how are drivers going to understand how their driving habits are necessarily to change or not in the next 6 months? We recommend that drivers compare car insurance quotes online at least every 6 months, regardless of whether you plan on canceling your policy with your current provider, switching, trying to get a lower rate. It doesn't matter. We think everyone should do it because rates are constantly changing. And, if anything, given the unpredictability of this moment, we can't say with certainty, just how low you can go, depending on the state you live in, depending on your driver behavior, depending on just how much or how little coverage you want to, rack up in your policy. It really is a personal decision. And I'll tell you what, if you don't see yourself really changing that much in your driving habits in the next 6 months, you really got to start doing some soul searching and think about whether you qualify for a lower rate somewhere else.
All right, Nick, we're going to transition into your top 10 list of best insurance companies. I'm speaking with Nick Dehn. He's Insurify's content specialist, and we're talking now about their study about the top 10 insurance companies. So we'll start at number 10. It's Safeco, and I've had them in the past, and they were fine. And actually, I have them for my homeowner's insurance, but even bundling between the home and the auto, it's not saving me any money. So how good, why do you have Safeco at number 10?
Well, listen, this study of ours, we release it every year, and the ranking sort of methodology we have is actually by a composite score. So we take into account overall customer ratings, user-generated ratings on our site. We also look into an insurance company's overall financial strength, what kinds of specific proprietary programs they offer, and we look at that in context of a company's overall reputation. So something like Safeco, right? Overall, you have excellent financial strength, right? It's owned by Liberty Mutual, and we've found, based on feedback from policyholders, that overall, sometime drivers and clean record drivers really are able to find affordable rates with Safeco. Now, again, it's apples and oranges sometimes. You can't always compare your plight to someone else's or your insurance profile or risk profile to someone else's. But at the end of the day, we found that Safeco, cracked the top 10 because it got pretty good notices from policyholders. And notably, they were one of those companies that offered some sort of payment flexibility and rebate program back in the early spring, the early days of the pandemic.
You have Allstate listed at number 9, but you then have Esurance, owned by Allstate, at number 3. So how did that work out when you have basically Allstate's online company rating so much higher than than Allstate?
Well, that's the power of branding, actually, my friend. No, but listen, Allstate, unparalleled financial strength. Obviously, it's one of the big guys here in the industry. But it also serves more customers. It has a wider sort of customer map than does its subsidiary Allstate there, Esurance rather. So, Allstate, if you have a policy through them in particular, it gets maybe middling customer feedback, but they did offer a 15% payback program April through June, again, in the early days of the pandemic. Sort of on more of a moratorium now, obviously, like I mentioned before. But we also we weigh financial strength, in these rankings, and something like Allstate, which has its own proprietary telematics program that rewards safe drivers, something that prides itself on cross-selling and offering bundling discounts. That's overall a reliable choice. Esurance, on the other hand, it's an Allstate company, but, from a branding and marketing perspective, it's much more accessible to a younger contingent of drivers, young adults who really maybe came of age online, who are now starting to come into their own as policyholders. Now probably really enjoy Esurance's easy online claims process, designed with, native web users in mind. And, so at the end of the day, we see the insurance landscape right now going digital. It's all digital all the time. And that's what we think this industry needs to really adjust to, especially now when so many elements of, online fintech operations have to be happening online. Esurance was always at the forefront of that. That's why they rank a little bit higher in our overall ranking.
And full disclosure, I have Esurance, and I've had them for years and years, and they have been, for at least for me, the least expensive option that I can find so far over the other big ones that I see on the list that we'll get to in just a second. You have at number 8, Auto Owners Insurance. That's not a name that's very familiar to me, as is number 4, New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance. I've never heard of the New Jersey Manufacturers Insurance Group.
Well, funnily enough, you probably haven't, because it's, over here in New Jersey, over on the East Coast. And, we try to, account for the different types of models that different policyholders might prefer when it comes to their, overall insurance needs, and especially the customer service experience. Auto owners is unique in that it works solely through independent agents. So for those who really prefer that agent, to consumer sort of model of buying one's insurance, auto owners is really an industry leader there. And it's sort of a pivot from what I just said before, but everything going digital. I think that's the way of the future in terms of this industry. But specific drivers, policyholders, might just prefer the agent touch. The one sort of roadblock to having drivers across the country compare and buy policies online is that at the end of the day, they really do just want to talk to an agent. And that's totally understandable. And there are still lots of insurers out there who are operating this agency model who, can provide an excellent customer service to their policyholders. Now, something like New Jersey Manufacturers in their hand, that's a hyper-regional sort of company, but it really it has a major foothold over in New Jersey and Pennsylvania in the insurance space. It's known for its really good customer service track record and offers lots of different types of policies, lots of different types of products. So if you're over in New Jersey and you need both your motorcycle and your boat and your ATV and your car insured, you can probably find an enviable, excellent package deal there. Is that the model for, the future, these hyper-targeted, hyper-local insurance companies? I don't see it, but for someone who prefers the regional touch, that's probably the choice for them.
I'm speaking with Nick Dehn. He is Insurify's content specialist. We're talking about the top 10 insurance companies on one of their latest studies. You can find it. Link to this study is also at the bottom of this of our description, as well as in Insurify.com. Number 7 is a company we all grow to know and love their commercials or hate their commercials, but we hear about them all the time. It's Geico, and you would think that it would be maybe higher in the top 5, but they're resting there at number 7.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Geico is a behemoth, right? It has a billion-dollar marketing spend, and we all, television sets across America, anyone who's watching television through the radio, we are at the receiving end of that. And listen, it's a great insurance provider if you are really looking for low rates. With such a massive consumer base, with such a name for itself, it's one of those providers that actually can, at the end of the day, afford to offer lower rates, especially and even to drivers who don't have stellar records, those with poor credit, those who are, not excellent drivers at the end of the day. They have such a foothold in the industry, they can actually afford to, provide such low rates. And that's what's really kept them alive and such a dominant, sort of presence in the P&C space. So, at the end of the day, what we do try to encourage is that you're not only going off of insurance providers that you see on television. They've really done an excellent job of making a name for themselves and cultivating a brand image that goes beyond just the specifics of what they do, insure your property. If that is something, that resonates with a lot of drivers out there, they're free to, compare rates with Geico. We would recommend that you, get a rate from Geico, get a quote, and then, actually compare that rate to, dozens of others that you might be able to find on a quote comparison site.
Yeah, because everybody knows the Geico Gecko and the Caveman and they're just on and on and on. You have 2 other companies here in the middle of the list at number 6 and number 5. You have American Family Insurance at number 6 and Amica at number 5. They're out there. We hear about them, but they just seem kind of boring.
And that's the thing, at the end of the day, what are the material differences between what companies are offering? The answer, spoiler alert, is actually not much. It really is a matter for a lot of, these companies. It is a matter of branding. It is a matter of marketing. It's a matter of, are they adopting an agency model? Are they only working through independent or captive agents? Are they offering an online quoting experience? Are they on a quote comparison site like Insurify? Those nuances and how they're actually selling to the consumer are important when we think about how drivers can ultimately take control of their finances and how they're able to take control over their insurance decisions. but maybe they don't have that edge in terms of, marketing spend or being able to generate lots of revenue through campaigns like that. But look, American Family, known for living up to its name and, really ensuring American families across the country, offering, enviable and discounts to, those with many drivers in the policy. We identified as the best for college students because families are eligible for, a pretty significant good student discount or student away at school discount. Amica's the same sort of thing. It's an interesting model in that it's a mutual insurance company, so it actually can afford to offer much lower rates. It's not, the pooling of risk means that all the policyholders technically own the company, and as a result, there's not the fluctuations of stock market as much to worry about in that case.
And your top two companies are pretty different. You have the Hartford at number 2. They are in all 50 states. And I think of them, more of retirement, a company more for retirement. And then at number 1, you have the Shelter Insurance Company, which is a smaller company, and they're only in about 15 states at number 1. So it's interesting to see these two different companies doing different things on the top of your list.
Absolutely. And I think that just speaks to the fact that when you aggregate all of this data, when you look at claim satisfaction, customer satisfaction, financial strength, various industry awards or recognitions, it all amounts to a sort of interesting, sort of potpourri of companies here. Like I said before, at the end of the day, what you're really getting is liability and or property and asset protection for you and your family and for your car. But, different drivers respond differently to all sorts of different programs or models of car insurance. So like you said, the Hartford, basically synonymous with, our good friends at AARP. It's well known to, offer, excellent discounts and programs for, drivers in their more advanced years. And then something like Shelter, which, is a little under the radar, but that's because it is, more of a regional company. It has its presence more in the Midwest and the South. So, overall, that's a population of policyholders who are, pretty happy with the claim service, customer service, and it's gotten good notices. But like I said before, that sort of model of insurance, whether or not that's available in your state, is not going to be for everyone. Some people want to buy completely online. They just want an experience that allows them to take their insurance decisions into their own hands. Some people want an agent to hold their hand and walk them through every single step of the process. And that is valid, so long as you're understanding, the costs that come with that sort of agency model and the costs that come with, your, demographic and risk profile.
And finally, there's a bunch of companies that are online that do what Insurify does. I have a insurance guy who shops different insurance companies and for both home and auto and that sort of thing. And they're always looking at my policies and every year just taking a look at any discounts that might be available. So what special does Insurify have that maybe the other places don't, that could offer me maybe a cheaper policy because they're all doing almost the same thing?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, really. Insurify, at this point is the most rated and top rated insurance comparison platform in the country, right? We've only been around for a little bit, but when you go on Insurify to compare car, home, or life insurance quotes, what you're really actually comparing are real, bindable quotes from real insurance companies. And what separates us from a lot of the pack is that if you just simply go online and click on the first link that tells you can compare car insurance quotes online, for example, chances are that's a lead generation site that's purely out to get your data and to sell it to the highest bidder. Now, on the other side of, that coin, you might have, platforms that promise you, accurate quotes, but are really estimates based on, industry data they might have in their databases or just their best guesses. At Insurify, we allow you to compare car insurance companies, national, regional, small, large, and compare all of these companies at scale. In just a few minutes, you can generate a quote list that matches your driver behavior, your demographic information, your risk profile. You are only required to share the information that's most directly relevant to how insurers set rates. And from there, you can compare quotes and coverage levels and even unlock discounts based specifically on your background and your needs. So we don't share information. We don't sell information. We're simply in the business of saving people money. And, at the end of the day, that's what we're really about, and that's what a lot of people need right now.
You're not kidding. I'm going to give it a shot and see if I come up with a better quote than what I have with Esurance, because I'm telling you, $1,800 a year is a lot of money for two cars that are already paid for, and that I'm really not driving that much. So got to find some.
I tell everyone, just, regardless if you really need to save money or not, just do it. It takes a few minutes. You won't be surprised at what you find.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Nick Dehn, for all of your insight, your expertise, and for the studies that I'll have the links for here in the description of the show. You're Insurify's content specialist. Nick, thank you so much for being here on the show today.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
And again, you can find those articles on the description of this show. I think the problem with the cost of my insurance is that I carry uninsured motorist insurance. It's an added protection if someone crashes into me and they don't have insurance, and that's a real problem. There are a lot of people out there driving without insurance. And I think you're covered. I should have asked Nick about this, but I think you're covered by having collision coverage, but the uninsured motorist gives a bit more security and coverage in case that happens. And look, in this day and age, when there are people out there driving without insurance and without registering their cars because they think it's too expensive, and typically they won't register their car when they don't have insurance, and so you'll see them those two issues go hand in hand. And they're generally being not responsible. The extra couple of $100 a year for me is probably worth it. I mean, there are times in my life when I would have gladly paid a few more dollars before something bad happened to avoid suffering the more expensive consequences of that bad thing happening. Actually, one of the times where I did spend the dollars ahead of time was this trip in Mexico when my wife and I were on a cruise, and we got off the ship there in Cabo, rent a car, and this guy, because that's one of the things we would do is typically rent a car and then explore these different places where the tourists usually don't go. And I rented a car. This guy was just insistent that I get their car insurance. And usually mine's covered. I have an extra separate policy with American Express that covers auto insurance. So it's not just the card that you charge it with and you get that added policy. It's actually an added policy on top of that I pay for anytime I get a rental car, and it pretty much covers everything. Anyway, this guy was just going on and on and on. It was, I don't know, $25 or $30. I said, fine. Okay, just go ahead and give me all the coverage you got, everything you got. Just lay it on me. Well, long story short, something bad happened, and the car was broken, and I could just walk away. I threw him the keys, and he goes, "Where's the car?" And I said, "It's out there somewhere. You'll have to go find it." I kind of told him where it was, kind of on a map. But that was actually one of the good times when I paid for some insurance that it came in very, very handy. But for me, it's a risk-reward thing. You take calculated risks. I try to minimize my risk anyway. If you want to read more about those two articles, you can read those studies on the Insurify website, and also it's posted on the description of this show. So thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. And as always, if you want to get a hold of the show, DrivingYouCrazyPodcast at gmail.com or 303-832-0217 is the phone number if you want to leave me a voicemail. Thanks for listening, and until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.